third of what he will cost in terms of outlay, who will make just about as much of a difference going forward, possibly more if you target the areas you need to target, like the bullpen.
Yeah. Go Angels, go Rays, go teams that are definitely going to try and win a World Series this year, John. Speaking of teams who tried to win World Series this year that I don't think are going to win World Series, this can be our final big one here, John. The Mets and the Yankees should both sell. And I think this is a wild situation here in New York. No Subway Series this year. Sad to say, John. But
the tabloids were so excited.
They really were. But for us MLB writers, fans, podcasters, John, the Mets and Yankees both being sellers at the deadline is actually sneaky awesome. Like, because they could do all kinds of crazy shit. Both of these teams can do some real crazy shakeups if they want to. And I'm here for it. Are you at the same place where you're like, it's actually awesome that both these teams might sell? Because there is a lot of intrigue that can happen here.
Look, personally, obviously, the idea of the Yankees saying screw it and not even trying for the postseason, and thus guaranteeing for 16th straight year that there will not be a World Series parade here in New York. Great. Fantastic. My dream lives on. But, look, I think what you said makes sense. I think that particularly for the Mets, who are six games under 500, 17 and a half games out of the division. Their division.
I mean, it's over. The Mets are
dead.
Very done.
They're in real, like, we have their postseason odds at 15%. That's about the same as the Cardinals, which, again, the NL Central, baby. Woo. But they are behind all three teams in the NL East, two of the teams in the NL Central, and three of the teams in the NL West. So that is 8 teams that are currently ahead of them in the postseason race. They're more or less tied with the Cardinals, Cubs, and Padres when it comes to record. So that's another group of teams that they basically have to... I think you're right. The Mets are done. Done.
Yes.
And I think of the two, they are the more likely ones to sell because they have the guys, I think, who, as, granted, they're older, they're expensive, but any team that gets them knows it's going to have them for the long run. And they have Scherzer and Verlander, two established veteran starters with postseason experience. And particularly if the Mets eat enough of those contracts, they can get some real talent in exchange back for them, I think.
Yeah.
One or the other, whatever they decide to do there. When it comes to the rest of the Mets, when it comes to the mess of the Mets roster, the mess that is the Mets roster. You look at who they have, who's going to be set to be a free agent next year. I should note, by the way, Scherzer is technically a free agent next year, but he has a player option for $43 million that he is 1,000,000% going to exercise. So too bad. But otherwise, I think David Robertson is an obvious candidate to be traded. Only signed to a 1-year deal, will be a free agent next year. Has been very good out of the bullpen for New York. Think he would make a lot of sense for, maybe the Tampa Bay Rays. Similarly, Tommy Pham, who's had a very nice bounce back season for the Mets, also on a 1-year deal, would be really helpful for any team looking for a right-handed bat off the bench. Ideally, that could slot him into a DH spot so he doesn't have to play the outfield because he is a very, very bad outfielder. Other reliever of interest, Adam Ottavino, I think would make a lot of sense for a team looking for some right-handed setup help in the late innings. Omar Narvaez, now that Francisco Alvarez has more or less taken over as the full-time starting catcher in New York, I think Narvaez would make a lot of sense for a team looking for catcher help. Carlos Carrasco, I think, is the only other major pending free agent that the Mets have. Cannot see him really being of any interest to anyone. He has looked very bad this season. More likely to be a guy that, just exists somewhere down the road for somebody. But, maybe Mark Canha, who has a $11.5 million team option with a $2 million buyout for next year. So any team that's getting him would be basically just paying $2 million for the rest of the season. Again, another good corner outfield bat, although one who defensively is not really bringing much to the table. I think the Mets have some real things to offer. Again, led by Verlander and Scherzer. The Yankees, I feel like less so because they have some short-term guys, but short-term guys who I think are less interesting in the grander scheme of things. Josh Donaldson obviously is not going to be an option, particularly given that he suffered a grade 3 calf strain. He is presumably done for the season. You're looking more at Luis Severino, who has been very bad this season and has been dealing with reduced velocity. Does not look right. I can't imagine any team really being willing to take that on for the time being. Frankie Montas, who's not going to be back till September. Can't really see that being a thing that's happening either. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, if you're looking for a decent utility piece, I guess. I don't know. Who really cares? Honestly, I think the two most interesting pieces that this Yankees team has to offer, because, and this is, I think, the difference between the Mets and the Yankees. I think for the Yankees, anything they're doing is a soft sell. It's mostly, hey, does anyone have interest in our pending free agents? Does anyone have interest in guys who are not part of our long-term plan, which I think in this case, you're looking at guys who only have another season of team control left, which is to say Gleyber Torres, Domingo Germán, and a handful of relievers. Maybe you can include Kyle Higashioka on that list, although I don't really think that there's much of any interest there. The other half of that would be, is there anyone interested in a salary dump? And in that case, it's, is anyone willing to take the $45 million we still owe DJ LeMahieu off our hands? Is anyone willing to take the $23 million we still owe Anthony Rizzo for the next 2 seasons off our hands? So, assuming that the answer to the great majority of those is no, I think the two guys who are most likely to move if the Yankees do decide to do a soft sell, one is Harrison Bader, who they acquired last year for Jordan Montgomery at the deadline, a fantastic defensive center fielder, a great base runner, a good power threat. Obviously, the issue is he has a lot of trouble staying healthy, a lot of soft tissue injuries in his past, but has shown the ability, especially in last year's playoffs, to be an impact bat and an impact glove, be a very, very good addition for any team looking for help in center field. The other guy, Wandy Peralta, who'll be a free agent after this season, has been a very good left-handed reliever for the Yankees. Any team that's looking for left-handed relief help, I think, will probably go to the Yankees and see what they want for Peralta. Beyond that, I think you're probably looking, if Gleyber Torres is not going to be part of the Yankees going forward, and given the glut of middle infield prospects they have, I think it's pretty safe to say that Gleyber's time in New York is probably getting close to an end. I do wonder if that's a guy who a team looking for a second baseman or some infield help could use. My question would be, who are those teams? But I think that's a whole other exercise we can maybe get into closer and closer to the deadline. Otherwise, I don't really see what the pieces are here that make sense. Again, unless there's another team willing to eat DJ LeMahieu's salary or Anthony Rizzo's salary in exchange for, sending over a lesser prospect, or if there's a team that's genuinely interested in making a move for someone like, I guess it would have to be Germán or Gleyber Torres or Clay Holmes. One of those 3 guys, all of whom are going to be free agents after the 2024 season, none of whom are presumably going in the Yankees' plans going forward because of age. Safe to say, I think the Yankees would make all 3 of those guys available if they could. I'm curious what they would get back, if anything, for them. But yeah, I mean, look, but even with saying, like, no, I don't think the Yankees are going to be part of any deadline blockbuster. I think if there's any deadline blockbuster out of any of the 2 New York teams, it would be the Mets giving up on one of Scherzer or Verlander. I think the Yankees are more likely just to try to move their pending free agents on some quieter deals. But there's still some useful players here. Again, particularly Bader and Peralta. I do think if the Yankees decide to throw in the towel for the season, those are the 2 guys who are going to be the most sought after on this roster in terms of guys who I think are realistic chances or have a realistic chance of being moved. Otherwise, I think it'd be more something like, maybe there's someone who's willing to give up a bucket of balls for Domingo Germán, whom is certainly has the stuff to be an impact starter, but is not consistent with that. And I think, again, he's already 30 years old. He's going to be a free agent after next season. I can't really see him being a long-term contract guy with the Yankees. I think it makes sense for them to get whatever they can for him while he still has that value of being a guy that the team knows will be part of their plans for next season. In that vein, I think a team like Cincinnati could really use a guy like Germán. I think a team like Milwaukee similarly would be in on a guy like Germán, because the other part of it is he's only making $2.5 million this year, and he's arbitration eligible next year. Realistically, he's only going to come in maybe at $4.5 million. That's very reasonable money for a back of the rotation starter. I think it would make a lot of sense for some of those smaller teams that are very much fixated on cost control, like the NL Central teams. Or maybe, I would say Baltimore. Baltimore weren't in division. Maybe more for a team like Texas if it wants to add some starting depth, or a team like the Giants or the Padres if they want to add some starting depth. Regardless, that's kind of what I expect out of the Yankees. I think with the Mets, it's going to be the go big or go home of, Scherzer and Verlander, while also looking to see if anyone's interested in particular, David Robertson and Adam Ottavino. I think are the two most likely guys from the Mets to be moved, as well as I think probably Tommy Pham. Although Pham's reputation, for lack of a better word, certainly precedes him in this case, and I think might complicate some stuff for the Mets too, because I don't know that anyone really wants to deal with the whole Tommy Pham experience, given how many teams he has burned bridges with over the course of the last several years.
I'm going to make a prediction. I think the Yankees do a skinny rebuild, like you said. Dump some salary if they can. See,
I think the important thing to note there is we've already started to get the news stories, presumably sourced from within the Yankees front office and ownership, that they're looking to avoid that third tier, the luxury tax.
Yeah.
The only way they could do that, obviously, is to shed as much salary as they can.
The Mets, though, I think they trade one of Verlander, Scherzer. I don't know which one, but I think one of them is moved this summer. I don't know which one.
I think both will be. I think both will be on the market. I think the Mets will listen to any and all offers for either of them, because there's no combination of moves at this point that they can make to reset, their luxury tax issues.
Yeah.
That's just that will just be an ongoing problem for them so long as Steve Cohen wants to spend money. But I think it would make. I think if you're looking at anyone,
here's what the best for baseball is, John.
What's that?
Max Scherzer to Tampa Bay and Justin Verlander to Baltimore.
That would be a lot of fun. And look, I think if you're the Mets and you want to focus on moving one over the other, you're guaranteed. I mean, the problem, I guess, is Verlander is guaranteed $43 million next year with a vesting option.
Who cares? The Orioles don't have anybody on the book.
No. I'm not saying for the team acquiring them. I'm saying if you're the Mets, who are you kind of more interested in trying to move in terms of saving the money? But the problem is Verlander is guaranteed that $43 million next year. Scherzer, for all intents and purposes, is, because he has a player option he can exercise, which he will do, because there's no way, shape, or anything in which he goes back onto the free agent market after the season he's had at the age of 39. This is a guy who's going to play that next season out, and I would be curious. I think it'll obviously depend on how the rest of this season goes, and next, whether or not 2024 might be the end for Max Scherzer. I think similarly for Verlander, whether or not his final year under contract, assuming he doesn't reach those vesting options, makes him more likely to call it quits after 2024 as well. I think if you're a team looking to acquire them, you're probably more interested in Verlander because you do have him under control for a full season after that. I guess you could say the same of Scherzer, though, anyway. I don't know. Ultimately, I think it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other as to which of them gets moved, if either. But I do think the Mets will probably try to see who, if anyone, is interested. Similarly, if you're looking at potential salary dumps for them, I think Starling Marte is a guy they might try to push heavily on other teams to see if anyone's interested. That's really the only guy, with the exception of Francisco Lindor and Brandon Nimmo, who is making big long-term money going forward, and Edwin Diaz, obviously, but I don't think anyone's going to trade for Diaz coming off his knee injury as it is, particularly because next season is the final season of arbitration eligibility for Pete Alonso, which means that will be his final season under team control. The Mets 1,000,000% need to figure out some kind of long-term contract with him this offseason. And in order to do that, they have to try to free up some of that money that's currently going to that Verlander, Scherzer, Marte troika. So I think the incentive for them will be heavy to try to move one of those guys. Whereas on the Yankee side of things, they've already got Judge locked up long-term. There aren't really any other long-term contract candidates on that roster, depending on what they want to do with Anthony Volpe, obviously, and depending on how Jason Dominguez comes out of the gate, whenever it is they call him up. I think they're a little more settled in what they want to do. I think the priority there is just, like you said, the skinny rebuild, bring in some younger guys, make some space on the roster for some younger guys as well. I think that would be part of the idea of trading Gleyber Torres, to give Oswald Peraza some consistent playing time at second base and see if he can be the guy in the middle infield. If not him, figure out something with Oswaldo Cabrera, maybe something figure out with Jose Peraza. Regardless, I think there's a really, really good chance both of those teams are sellers at this deadline, because I think, like you said, the Mets are just out of it. I don't think there's any real chance the Mets make the playoffs. The Yankees, for as much as they still have a good shot, the AL East is a gauntlet. The Astros and Rangers are not going away. There will be an AL Central team involved somewhere in this of some level. It's a really, really tough race for them going forward. The thing I think that separates the Mets and the Yankees here, though, and why I think the Yankees would do the soft rebuild, is they're going to get Aaron Judge back at some point. That will be obviously a huge boon for them. I think there's still a chance that even if they do sell, they can be a playoff team. But I think this would be a good opportunity for them to shed to get something back for those pending free agents who they're not going to get anything back for in exchange when they leave. assuming they don't sign them long term, which I don't think they will, and also see if a guy like Torres or Herman or anyone else of that ilk, or maybe again if LeMahieu or Rizzo is appealing to anybody, get out from under those contracts and start trying to figure out what a new Yankees kind of core looks like. Because I think that's kind of the other part of this with the Yankees is it's kind of the admission that this core needs a change at this point. What Brian Cashman has been doing the last years has just not worked in collectively. That offense has just not succeeded, with the exception of Judge over particularly the last 18 months, but really since I think the midpoint of 2021. I think if anything, you make those deals to try to shake that roster up and figure out some new avenues to go by. We'll see. It's going to be really interesting. And I think the Mets are the likeliest to make the biggest splash in all of that with moving potentially one of Scherzer or Verlander. Although I should note, Mets fans, you guys should probably prepare yourselves now for the fact that neither of Scherzer or Verlander is going to bring back much in the way of prospects. It's really not going to happen.
But David Stearns is probably on the way in December. That'll be nice.
Who knows? I mean, I think if anything, look, I mean, I think if you're the Mets, forget Shohei Ohtani, you're probably looking over to NPB right now and asking Yoshinobu Yamamoto's agents, so what's it going to take? We've already got Kodai Senga. Doesn't he want to join Kodai Senga? I think it's more realistic that they go for the next, well, not the next Ohtani. No one is the next Ohtani. But given that, again, I don't think Ohtani goes to an East Coast team. If you're the Mets, go after the big... I mean, especially, again, also, they need to free up money for Pete Alonso. They need to figure that out. He is a centerpiece of that offense. They have to lock him up long-term. It's going to be a really ugly contract by the end because right-handed first basemen do not exactly age particularly well. Regardless, the Mets don't have a choice. They have to lock down Alonso. And in order to do that, they need to try to move as much salary as they can between now and ideally the beginning of the 2024 season.
There you go. Jon Tayler, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at Fangraphs.com this week?
I'd like to note, by the way, the Yankees are currently down 4-0 to the Angels. Luis Rengifo just hit a home run, which I didn't know was a thing that could happen. Regardless, what...